Well, hello everybody. Thanks for coming out. We're honored to have Carol Craig with us tonight. She is the CEO of Craig Technologies. So one of the things that I've always been really fascinated by about Carol is she's right here in the Space Coast, and she's just done amazing things. And for those of you who may have heard of her or have known of her, you probably also know that Carol is, you know, this is her secret, but she is Superwoman.
Not.
And in her engineering, she has probably also figured out how to bend time. So we'll ask her, we'll press her on those a little later today.
Yeah.
But without further ado, we'll start with Carol, and I'm going to go ahead and start asking her some of the questions. And later on, we've got another mic that will come around, and everybody can feel free to ask questions. As you know, if you've been here before, this is pretty informal. So if you feel like getting up and getting soda in the middle of it, it's cool. And if you really have to ask a question, that's cool too. Just get the microphone so we get it on camera. This is going to go up on YouTube later on. Tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial career. Like, were you always entrepreneurial, or is this something that was more recent?
No, actually, you open this for me first?
Absolutely.
I just had my nails done. I didn't want to break a nail. I know that sounds very girly, but it's very true. And you know, as an entrepreneur, you have very little time for yourself. So when you get that one moment of, okay, I can either get the nails done or I can do whatever, you got to take advantage. So anyway, so no, I was definitely not always an entrepreneur. My background, I don't know if you know, but I am an engineer. Not a good one. I was an average engineer. I'm a good businesswoman, but I don't think I'm that good of an engineer. But so computer science, engineering, primarily focused on software engineering, and that was what I like to do. I like to write code. So I had jobs, but I'm also, I hate to say I'm ADD, ADHD, because I don't know that that's necessarily true. I just know that I like to do a lot of things. You know, time is short, life is short. So I like to do a bunch of different things. So I had multiple jobs. But the entrepreneurial side of me, I don't think really came out until after I had joined the Navy, was following my husband around, got out of the Navy, and then here I am trying to be an engineer, but I'm stuck writing COBOL code. And all of you who know who are engineers can understand how, maybe I shouldn't say humiliating, but it's a little depressing, right? So anyway, at that point, it's when, okay, I got to do something different, and I just decided, okay, maybe I can do the consulting gig. And for me, you know, I was really blessed to be married at that time, and my husband was still in the Navy, and so I could, that takes off a little bit of that stress of, okay, I've got insurance through him, I kind of fall back on, you know, on his salary kind of thing, but right when I did this, he decides he wants to get out of the Navy. So right when I'm trying to grow a company, he says, okay, well, and we have a son with a disability, so he made the right decision, but it was kind of one of those moments of, oh, geez, what have I got myself into? Now I'm the breadwinner. So it was a real fast-tracked, you know, kind of made that decision to start my own company, and pretty much I couldn't turn back at that point.
Were you fairly successful by the time?
Yeah, one of the things I did differently maybe would be that I was a consultant, and so I was able to be fairly profitable. It was just me, so it's a, you know, one-woman show. At the time, you know, it was pretty lucrative. I had a lower rate compared to most, but my low rate was pretty high. So I could do that. I could establish, you know, a little bit of that past performance type of, you know, financial stability, and so that kind of, so yes, that was success at that level. Now, once I decided I want to, you know, have a real company, or I say become a real boy, you know, I can do this, then I switched, and I decided I'm going to kind of put the infrastructure in place, be a little more risky, you know, back off from the actual consulting side, and, you know, jump all in and make this a real company. So, so yes, I was successful as a consultant, and I was not successful when I went into, you know, creating the business, because it was pretty much, you know, putting infrastructure in place, dumping a whole lot of money into something that wasn't making money for quite a few years. So
as a consultant, were you coding?
No. It was still back on the COBOL thing. What I was doing was reverse engineering COBOL code, because I know a lot of us don't like documentation, right? That's one of the, and I don't mean to stereotype, but you know, when you're writing code, you want to write code. You don't want to have to document. Well, that's basically what had happened. This healthcare company had these legacy systems, all the COBOL code was written, but there was no documentation. And they were doing a migration over to a client server at the time, but they had no business rules. So they said, hey, would you be interested in doing it? And at the rate they were paying me, I'm like, yeah, I'll do anything. I'll sweep floors for that kind of money. So that's what I ended up doing. But that opened the doors. You know, made good relationships. I even hired several of the people that I worked with at this particular healthcare company, and they still work for me today.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Very cool.
So you had employees doing that as well?
Well, what happened was there was more and more work. So, you know, I'm doing the reverse engineering. They liked what I was doing. It was awesome because I could work, and I didn't have kids yet. I could work 80 hours if I wanted to. I could work 100 hours and get paid for every one of those hours. And I'd get up in the middle of the night and do it. It was awesome. So I did that, but we were so successful. I was so successful that there was more and more work, and I was trying to figure out, you know, how do I continue to take on all this work? So I started hiring some of my friends. Some of them were Navy wives who were smart, but, you know, couldn't get jobs kind of like I was. And then I, you know, just kind of brought on more consultants, 1099s. And then there was a point where I had to say, all right, I have so much work, and I could only do so much. Maybe I need to make this a real company. And that's when I ended up changing.
That's really interesting because as engineers and as programmers, we tend to be very much into the technology, into doing the actual work. So it sounds like you went from an engineer to an executive at some point.
Yeah, and I'm not sure when that happened, actually. That's a good point. Because you kind of have to. I mean, whether you're an independent consultant or anything, I mean, you've got to still keep an eye on your business, because if you don't, it's not going to last very long. And everyone kept saying, you know, you've got to stop being the one that's doing the work, and you've got to move. But you can't do that if you don't have enough money to support it. So it was really kind of balancing it. And I did enjoy the business part. When I started to do my research, you know, and I was in Barnes and Nobles, you know, buying books on small business taxes and everything I could. Because, by the way, I have no business background whatsoever. I have an accounting minor, but I got a D in all my classes, so I don't even think it's official. So just enough to be dangerous. So I had to educate myself on that aspect. And I think that's when I really started to enjoy that part. But I still liked writing code. And up until about 2 years ago, I still was involved. I'd be like, okay, go buy me the latest, I don't know, whatever compiler type. At the time, even back then, I had my own Ada compiler, and then I wanted to do the write my own iPhone apps. So I had the guys buy the whole kit and everything. And it all just sat there. You know, I had a big monitor, and I had the whole thing. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then like, I really can't do this. I really got to run a company. So anyway, so I maintained for a little while, keeping the technology side, and then, you know, moved into the executive, running the company.
So you mentioned you hired your friends early on, right?
Hired my friends, my family, and my parents, and cousins, and my sister. I fired my sister. I fired a cousin. My parents were 70 when I hired them, and they still work for me today. And it's not charity. My mother, I was telling you earlier that my mother has a master's in mathematics education, and she's 83. So you can imagine kind of one of those women that even back then was leading the way. But my biggest concern was money, even as an independent consultant. You know, and I needed to manage those books. You know, I had QuickBooks. And how do you do that? And who do I trust? Well, I trust my mother. And my mother, she's the complete opposite of me. She doesn't swear. She doesn't drink. We're both strong Christians, but she, you know, never misses a day of church, kind of a thing. And she is so fiscally responsible, it's almost sickening. And so, but that was good, because I like to spend money. And so she helped me through the years of, you know, how am I going to finance this? I had like 8 credit cards maxed out because I didn't have any money. And then she was the one that's saying, you know, we're going to pay these things off. Every bit you can, you pay it off. If we had a loan, you pay it off. And pretty much got to the point where I was debt-free, other than, you know, like a line of credit that would support, you know, asset-based lending. So again, that works. You know, you can hire family and friends. You just got to hire the right family and friends. And you can't be afraid to, you know, say, hey, this isn't working. My sister and I didn't actually fire her. We just kind of came to an agreement that it really wasn't working out too well. And we're speaking now after all this. No. But I did have to fire one of my cousins. I mean, she was really taking advantage, and it was one of those where you just say, you know, I'm sorry, this isn't going to work. But you'd be surprised. Family members, especially friends, they will work so hard for you and support you. The loyalty is there, and then you return the loyalty as well. So it's one of the best things that I could have done and still do today.
Have you had to fire any of your friends?
You know, actually I haven't. It's funny you say that. I don't think I've had to. I've become friends with some of my employees, and then it has not worked out, which is tough. But of all the friends that I hired, I haven't had to fire anyone. So I think I'm a pretty good judge of character, and I'm hiring more about, I don't know, culture or, you know, the personality than I am the skill set. Because I honestly believe you can teach anybody anything. I mean, you can tell if somebody's intelligent. Now, you do need skills. I mean, if you need a software developer, that kind of thing. But when you look at your infrastructure, I think that I like to look, I call it my island of misfit toys. Actually, the people that work for me, and they're not insulted by that. They're all very different. They're not what the traditional people that you would find in a company or a contracting firm. Or I tend to hire bartenders, you know, because I've, you know, talked to them. Their personality, they're very outgoing, and you know, I just do kind of things differently, I guess.
So I'd encourage those of you that want to work for Craig Technologies to come talk to Carol after.
When I'm drinking. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. You can't put this on YouTube now, can you? No, but it's true. And I would say this is one thing that even today came to mind. I had some resumes, and people were like, "Yeah, we went out on your website, and we were, you know, looking for a requisition and how I fit something." I said, "You know, don't do that, because you'd be surprised." In my head, I'm always thinking about the next hire. I'm thinking about the next infrastructure. I know we're going to grow. So I have a plan, and that's not going to be out on my website to hire. So when the resumes come in, you know, we talk about it. Most of the time, the people, especially internally, or even some of our software development, we've never put that on the internet that we're looking for that. It just happens to be, you know, it's karma, whatever it is. But, you know, so do that. If you are looking for a job, if you are starting your company and you're hiring people, you know, just take in as many resumes as possible and encourage people that to not be shy. You know, walk up in the mall, which just happened, say, "Here's my resume." And I had a gentleman come to my door, actually. And some people might think, "Oh, I can't believe you just came to my house," and, you know, whatever. But he knew a friend of mine who was a neighbor, and he rode his bike up and said, you know, "Hey, I wanted to give you my resume." And I thought that was the coolest thing. I thought that was the most bravest thing I'd ever seen. And I thought, he wants to work. You know, and so, you know, what an awesome thing to do. I thought that was awesome.
Now, your entrepreneurial career has primarily been in Brevard, right?
It has. Yes. I got to think back now. It feels like so long. And I know you're going to ask a follow-on question, but just to give the background, so when I moved to Brevard, it was in 2004. I was the only employee, had just a small little place down in Cocoa Village, and I think I might have had 10 employees at that time. So I was doing the consulting, but I decided, all right, I'm going to make this a real company, and I was working with healthcare customers. So it was kind of working in that direction, but it hadn't really gelled or anything had happened yet.
So what's it been like, you know, being in Brevard since 2004? A lot of changes have happened. You know, the space program isn't quite what it used to be. What has it been like being an entrepreneur in Brevard?
The one thing I would say, I thought this from the very beginning. I thought this was the most entrepreneurial type of environment I had ever seen. And I've lived all over because I was in the Navy, and Virginia Beach was where I started the company. And I don't know if it was just the, you know, 2 degrees of separation in Brevard County, which most of you, if you live here, you know what that's all about, you know, or whether it was just the encouragement of the people that I ran into. I don't know what it was, but I honestly think moving to Brevard is what helped me flourish as an entrepreneur, grow as a business person, you know, feel comfortable in what I'm doing and, you know, taking those risks. Because my business was not here. I didn't have any business until, gosh, I don't even know, maybe it's been 3 years, well, maybe longer than that, 4 or 5 years. Most of my business at the time was actually in other states, and up in Virginia Beach and elsewhere. So it wasn't like I was coming here and growing because of business. Now, today I keep asking what the count is. I think we have almost 200 employees in Brevard County, which to me is just crazy, considering I just was, you know, one, which seems like just a few years ago. I know it's been 10 years, but it's been pretty cool. And that growth has happened because of the community here, and because of how people, you know, work together as a community. And I really think that everybody wants to see each other succeed. Not just because the space program went away, but just because that's the environment. So I think it's just an awesome opportunity for people when you want to start your business and, you know, have that encouragement.
So how did the space program going away affect your business?
Well,
I know that's a leading question because...
No, well, yeah. I talk about the Aerospace Defense Manufacturing Center that used to be the NSLD thing, that all that kind of stuff. Well, so I guess I got to think back to when all this was happening. How was it affecting me? It didn't affect me negatively. The positive side came, I think, when I guess when I started my manufacturing center. So I don't know how much people know about, but I have an engineering and technology division, and I started that. That was primarily services with the government, and grew that to it's probably about 35 million a year when I then started a manufacturing shop. Actually, it was a machine and tool shop. And it was just kind of an on-the-fly thing, do some prototyping, see what we could do with it. That since turned into taking over the NASA shuttle logistics depot that's over in Cape Canaveral. Obviously that opportunity would not have been there if the space program hadn't gone away. But at the same time, some other good things for me on the side would be the talent, the engineers that are available. The switch over to commercial space. I mean, we have quite a few customers that are commercial space now, and I think that's great. I don't like to see anybody lose jobs. That was the unfortunate side of it. I wish things had moved faster and that gap had been a lot smaller. But again, so I think for me that was all an advantage. And my company grew in a recession, crazy, but mainly because of my diversity. And some of the diversity was not saying, hey, I'm just over here in Brevard and I'm going to focus on space. It was, I'm going to focus on, I was desperate. I'll do anything other than roads and commodes. I wasn't going to, do the things that I really didn't know that much about. But I'm like, you know what? I will do anything just to get this company off the ground. Yes, ma'am.
Are you the person out there doing the networking with businesses, getting the contracts, or do you have other people to do that as well?
I now have other people that do it as well, but in the beginning it was me, for sure. And then there was a period of time where I tried to back off completely because my kids were really young, and like I said, I had some with a disability. So when we moved here to Brevard, I had an 18-month-old and a 3-year-old with a disability. And I had said in the beginning when I started my company, I'm not going to travel. Or if I'm traveling, I'm taking the family with me. But, so when I would go and I'd be the one marketing.
So how did you get into that whole networking, marketing, getting contracts? That's kind of mysterious.
It is, and it took forever. And I don't mean to discourage, but it took me about 3 years. One of the things I did that, with the government side at least, they have a lot of conferences. And they cost like $300-400 or something. So I sucked it up and I paid $300 for this conference up in Virginia Beach. And I went to it, and all I did was check in, grab all the email addresses and all the information, and then I went home. I didn't go to any of the talks. I didn't network around and hand my cards out. I went home and I just started sending emails. And I probably sent 1,000 emails and got maybe 10 responses. But out of those 10, I ended up having relationships with like 5 companies, and then I started going in and talking to them. And of course, I'm woman-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned. I'm Cuban. I'm adopted. My grandfather came over from Cuba, so I had that designation. But it still didn't matter. I didn't get any of those set-aside contracts for years. But just the coming in and talking to some of the larger companies and trying to market. And it probably helped that I was a woman, because they're going to remember me. There's a sea of white guys, right? A sea of old white guys, mainly. And no offense to anybody there. I don't mean that bad at all. It's just, it's traditionally like that. And so you have to make yourself be set apart. So whether you're a guy or whatever your age is, there's got to be something that helps them remember. And I'm sure part of it, being a woman, and I was always talking about my kids, and they were grandfathers, and so that's what I did. That's with the networking. I got personal when it came to the networking as well. I'm not a stiff person anyway. I pretty much say what I think, but when you make it personal, it reaches to that next level. I don't know if that makes sense, but it takes time, which is the bummer, because you don't have time. At least. Even now, I still have that issue with this startup, with the manufacturing side. I'm like, oh.
So I know the more you do, the more.
Actually, if you don't mind, can you please speak into the mic? That way we'll have it in the recording. Otherwise, the questions don't show up.
Oh. So as you get busier, then you have this, network of networks, and then people who know you refer you to other people, and then that brings in more business. You don't have to network so much.
Yeah, we're finally getting asked to the prom. That's exactly what it is. I'm like, wow, I have so many dates now, I don't know what to do. But it's true. Finally, they start asking. But I did finally let go and let my team go out there. But then I realized I still have to be involved, because I am an engineer who runs a business. So I know I know the business side. So you can't ever get away from it completely. You always need to still be out there doing the networking yourself.
Right, right.
So very important. But then how do you balance? Because again, I still have little kids, and my son, like next week I'm going up to Johns Hopkins to check us. We're going to the hospital for a couple of days, tests and stuff like that. And, you've got to kind of go, how do I
so how do you balance? Do you delegate?
I
you
don't
good delegator?
balance. Yeah, no, I don't do it well. So one of the provost at FIT said it the best way. He says it's okay to drop balls every once in a while as long as they're the ones that bounce, kind of thing, and that's true. So some things you go, okay, I can let it go. Some things are really important. I am again very blessed. My husband flies for the airlines, so he's got a very flexible schedule. He's a military officer, so he's flexible there. He's reserves, and he's great with our kids. And I have a nanny, so there's that aspect. But I didn't have kids just to hand them off to somebody else, kind of a thing. So I just try to, kind of keep it in front of me and make the decisions, and then have no regrets. If I've canceled a meeting because I'm going to take my daughter to school today, I don't care. I'm doing it.
That actually brings me to another question. So being an entrepreneur, one of the things those of us that have been there, realize when an entrepreneur thanks their spouse, it's a genuine thanks, right? So tell us a little bit about that early on and now, especially once you had the kids and being an entrepreneur and doing all of the other stuff that you do.
Yeah,
right.
And being married to a Type A former F-18 pilot, and we have some interesting dynamics going on, spouse-wise, yeah, I don't know. I could say so much. What do you want me? How do you?
So I know the flight benefits are great.
That's why I won't let him quit, actually, because we can still go standby, and we get really good discounts on the Disney cruises.
Right.
Because at some point, my husband was like, "Okay, I don't want to fly for the airlines anymore," and I'm like, "No way," because then he'd be home all the time too, and I'm like, "That is not going to happen." But so it's been interesting. I will say one of the things I did in the very beginning, I actually didn't involve him in the business. He wanted to be, and he still wants to be so badly, but we have different personalities, so we try to find a fit, and early on I tried to make him COO, and he didn't get along as well with the employees. Not in a bad way, but again, I'm very unique, and it's hard to duplicate my personality, so that didn't really work. But I also did not tell him about the finances. That was the biggest thing, because he, again, is the opposite of me. He's not as risky as I am. He thinks through things, he takes his time, he's very, very frugal, and there's no way I could have been doing the things I did and told him, the money side of it as well. And then to add to the dynamic, of course, me being gone now quite a bit, him being the breadwinner, the F-18 pilot, me following him around as a Navy wife, it flipped. And so that's a challenge. And anything, well, it's going to be on YouTube, so anything I say, I guess I'd say in front of my husband. But he's been so supportive of it. That's been the biggest thing, is verbally just saying, I'm very proud of you, anything you need. But I can still see that it's not totally easy. Because, and I don't know that it's a male or female thing. If you were the other side, as a wife who's at home and a husband who's running the business and gone all the time, that's tough to be the one that's kind of in the background. But now my husband, though, is running for school board. So he's now kind of getting himself more in the forefront. And one of the things he did, too, I can think of things, but I think was one of the greatest things he could have done, I had a friend advise him to go through Lead Brevard. And he's now on the board. That was the best thing I could have done, because he was getting a little like, you know everybody. You go out to all these, community things, and I don't know anybody at all. And he's kind of doing that. So I talked to a friend, and he said, send him to Lee Brevard. And it was unbelievable. He met so many people. It just changed the dynamics completely. And again, now looking at where he is, he's running for school board. So.
Now you mentioned in the tech arena, especially in the startup world, there's a lot of discussion about how it's just the good old boys club, and there aren't a lot of female founders. Even in Silicon Valley, one of the things we're really proud of at TrepHub is it's not really that unbalanced within our little community, right? So how have you found being a female entrepreneur in the tech arena?
Well, and I'm tech arena and government contracting. So there's very few. I didn't really notice it to be honest, up until maybe a couple years ago. Part of that's because, okay, I was a naval flight officer, you know, all men there. I was an engineer back in, you know, 80s, 90s, something like that. You know, all men. Everything I've kind of done has been in a male-dominated world, and so it was no big deal. But I think I had my head in the sand a little bit because all I could think about was how am I going to grow this business. You know, I didn't really think about the male-female type thing until last few years. I've started to notice a little bit of the prejudice or some of the stereotypes, you know, the comments, and I don't know that they mean to do it. I had one gentleman who works for an organization here local. We're sitting, and we're in my facility, which is 160,000 square feet. He knows, you know, how big the company is, and he was talking about something, and he said, you know, he goes, "There's a term, C corporation. Are you familiar with it?" And I was just like. And the president of my ADMC is sitting next to me, and his eyes like, oh, because he thinks I'm just going to like go off completely. But I laughed, you know, because I thought, I can't believe he just said that, you know. And I said, yes, I'm familiar with it. And then we kept talking, and that was the only way I think to deal with those kinds of things is you laugh. He didn't mean it, you know. He didn't do it on purpose. He's a nice guy. I mean, it was probably just, you know, whatever it was. But I think the best way that I've handled the issues is to just not have a chip on my shoulder. And I just don't see barriers. I mean, like I said, my mother, I mean, obviously she didn't see barriers way back when, so why would I see it that way? So I guess, you know, this moral of that or whatever is, you know, we are women. The very, I think, qualities that we apologize for are the ones that make us so successful. And I think you have to embrace that uniqueness, use it to your advantage, take advantage of it in a good way, and then, you know, try to not let all the BS that you get from the male side bother you. And I don't see it as much anymore too. I don't mean to disparage. It's not like that. I think it's a much more open environment, but it's not a bad thing.
Now you're also in CS, right?
Computer science, yeah. CS is
of course, CS is computer science.
Right, yeah.
So computer science is also yet another field which is mostly men, right? And like I was saying, I tell my daughter that don't worry about that. That's just, you know, societal stereotypes and whatnot. So what would you have a daughter as well, right? What's your communication to your daughter about? Like, do you tell her? I told her don't watch Disney.
No, I don't. Actually, I don't verbally communicate anything. I hope that I'm leading by example, and she sees what I do. That, you know, I have the female side of me, although with my boots today I don't look too female, but I have the female side, I have the athletic side, you know, I ran track in college, you know, the engineering, you know, I sing, play piano, and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's more of a well-rounded, you can do anything, and it shouldn't be looked at as this is, there's more men, you know, although I do have to say, I was boy crazy, and I think the reason I gravitated toward these, I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all the guys, you know, I mean, this is great, why wouldn't I want to, but honestly, I don't think she sees that. I don't think she recognizes what is more of a male-dominated type of environment, and again, it's more about just, you know, leading by example, and so I have that, you know, that opportunity, you know, as a dad, that's maybe a little bit different. But yeah, I encourage her to do just that. Now, she's kind of a bully, so she's kind of turned into, she's a tomboy. She doesn't even like boys at this point because she thinks she's better than they are, but she is. But again, I just don't squash any of that, you know, kind of push her in that direction.
Now, you said that your mom had a lot of influence on you as well, right?
Huge.
So tell us a little bit about your parents. You mentioned that you were adopted.
I'm adopted. They're from Central Illinois, and if you saw them, you know it's called American Gothic. You know the Pitchfork couple. I swear to God, they look just like them. And they live on a farm now, and like I said, they don't swear, they don't drink, they don't do any of that. But they absolutely, for me, and this is why parents and, you know, how we take care of our kids, other kids, you know, the kids in the community, you know, it's so important. They pretty much encouraged me, said I could do anything I wanted to do. I mean, to the point of ridiculousness, too. You know, like 1 month I decided I want to learn to play cello, so my mother rented me a cello. So I taught myself cello for a month, and then that was it. I was like, okay, I'm done. I want to do something else. You know, when I went to join the Navy, they didn't think they're like, oh, that's cool, great, you know, good for you, join the Navy. So they were very encouraging. But they were also all about humility, you know, and being humble. And I'm Methodist, and I think that Methodist guilt has also kept me grounded, you know. And that was one of the things that they really kind of drove home is, you know, there's a lot of other people out there a lot worse off. And that's one of the reasons I think that I got so involved in the community when I came here. You know, I haven't sold any companies. I'm rich on paper kind of a thing, you know. I mean, and I'm very blessed, and I'm able to pay myself a really good salary now. Didn't pay for several years. But for me, I felt like I needed to give back to the community now. And again, that for sure came from my parents of, you know, you be grateful for what you have, give back. You weren't put on this earth to take. You were put on this earth to give. And that's kind of what they gave me. And I returned the favor by hiring them. And that's what they say. This is their words. And they claim the reason they're still alive is because they work for me. Because that's when you talk about, you know, the older workforce, and I mean even older, you know, they love it. They're still intelligent. It helps keep them sharp. My parents are so sharp. Physically, they're active, but mentally, you know, my mother still can do QuickBooks better than anybody else. She could come to this TrepHub and teach you all QuickBooks really well. But I think that's important, whether you're talking about workforce, you're talking about your own family, you know, just to know that the value of individuals doesn't stop after 55, 65, or 70 or whatever. So, sorry, I could talk forever.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fascinating. One of the other things that you mentioned earlier was you felt this rush, right? You felt like you wanted to do a lot of things, right? And I sometimes tend to do that. I have about 6 projects going simultaneously right now as well. And I think a lot of the folks in the audience probably relate to that too. You know, they're probably blowing off yet another project, right?
Yeah.
So where do you think that sense of urgency comes from?
Well, mortality, probably, because you know I recognize my own mortality, so I only have so much time. With the company, though, sense of urgency, it's always been, you know, time is not on my side when it comes to the business. But I also think some of it is there's just so much opportunity out there. I mean, I love life, and there's so many things that I want to do. Problem is I want to do them all at the same time, and that is a major issue. Like even right now, I'm in full meltdown mode. I've never been like this. I've got so many things. I start one thing and then I go over to another. It's the whole multitasking really isn't a good thing, and so it even happens when you're at whatever level I'm at. I don't know what level I'm at, but again, there's just so much opportunity. I don't know where a sense of urgency came from, or if it's really a sense of urgency. It's more just an idea of, you know, there's such opportunity out there, and I want to take advantage of it. And I'm competitive too, so I don't want anyone else to get that opportunity. So I mean, I'm really competitive, and so maybe that's some of it too.
I guess we should start taking some questions from the audience, and please pass the mic around. So if you want to ask a question, raise your hand and make sure the mic makes it to you.
Well, since I have the mic, I'll start. You spoke about in the beginning when you were consulting how successful it was, how quickly it grew, and you hired all your friends and neighbors and lots of work. But you also spoke about it was difficult, it was risky. What were the ways you wanted to expand, and why was that risky?
So what I ended up doing is that when I decided I wanted to make this a real company, I really believed that putting the infrastructure in place first was what needed to happen, which meant backing off on a lot of the work, hiring people to do the contracts, you know, investing in technology, putting all that in place first. That was the risky part. So had I kept just being a consultant and having 1099 friends and family that kind of helped me, I could have continued and done very well and been successful. But it's when I made that change and that mindset of, okay, I want to get bigger. And I honestly didn't believe that. I've seen a lot of companies that did this where they would wait for the contracts to come in or try to get the big work, and then they didn't have the infrastructure to support, and they didn't have the money, you know, or the relationship with the bank to bring it in. So I made that conscious decision. and I got to a point, I always felt like I had a backup plan, you know, recoverable is what it was for me. So there was a point where, you know, if I crossed it, then there was no going back. And I got to that point when I was here in Brevard County, and my husband got out of the Navy, making, you know, like 25 grand a year flying for the airlines. I'm not paying myself a salary. I've got these 2 little kids. That was not recoverable anymore at this point. You know, I mean, it's because I always thought, well, no matter what the loans are, I could pay them off. And it's like, no, I had to move forward. You know, there was no option, you know, to move forward. So that's where the risky part came in, is when I made that change.
So your investments were in office space, computers, or hiring people at your expense?
Yes, it was hiring. It was office space. I worked out of my house for the longest time, even here up until a few years ago. Yeah, it was all of those things. That was the investment. And that's when I started doing the credit cards. And I went to the bank. Because I had the experience as a consultant and could show that I had a track record, I went to the bank and said, you know, I'd like to get a line of credit. And then I pretty much tapped out the line of credit and said, hey, can you turn this into a working loan? And then said, can I have another line of credit? Gave me the line of credit, tapped that one out. I went back the 3rd time, and they pretty much just said, you know, see you later, you know, no thanks. And it was about that time that I moved down here to Brevard. And I had already kind of been thinking about, what am I going to do? I got involved with the factoring, which is called legalized loan sharking, but it's actually selling your receivables. It's not a bad thing if you do it right. I mean, if you know this is a short-term kind of thing. And then I got involved with a bank here locally, a relationship with a great banker, and he actually took a chance on me, and then I was able to kind of make that crossover once again of, okay, now I've got this established line of credit, I've got a couple more customers, you know, maybe this is going to turn out all right. But so it's been risky, and it's still risky today. I mean, this manufacturing, I mean, it's like a startup all over again, you know, and so I don't sleep at night. You know, you still fight with banks, even if you've got a great track record and you can show over 10 years and we're doing this, you know, it's still the same thing. I know, same thing every time. And it's hard not to get really mad and go, look, you know, look, I am smart. Look what I've done, okay? But that's, you know, they're banks and they're underwriters, and you've got to sell your story. No matter how successful you are, it feels like you always got to sell your story and sell yourself.
Oh. Why did you choose Brevard County to move to?
My husband and I were on vacation, and we just thought it seemed like a cool place at the time. We bought some property, because all we owned at the time was like a futon couch, and we're like, yeah, we probably ought to invest in something, you know, because we're like 30-something. So we bought property here, and then when, after Danny was born and John was thinking about getting out of the Navy, he said, you know, where do you want to go? I'm like, I thought it was a pretty nice place. We researched the schools, which is why now John is involved in wanting to, you know, be on the school board, because that's the reason we came to Brevard. You know, the final reason was the school system was amazing. So.
Well, did you know that there were a lot of large and small engineering companies?
I knew NASA, I knew Harris, I knew DRS, and I kind of went, wouldn't that be cool if I had them as customers? But I didn't let that limit me, because I knew that I could have customers everywhere. I wanted to pick the best place for me as a person, as my family to live. And then the business could be elsewhere, and if I got business in the same town, great. But I didn't let that drive where I went. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I was just going to pass it. Hi, Mike LaFortune here. So first, Ahmed, thanks again for having these. These are great. Thanks, Carol, for coming out. These have been great sessions. I think this is tremendous what you're doing, and I really appreciate TrepHub bringing folks together like this. So I've got several questions, but I'm going to pass the baton. I'll ask one here, you, and then one of you. I would ask that, I think looking at the people that you've brought into these sessions so far, I think each of them have community connections, not just with their business, but also in their social life and their community life. And I'd encourage the guests and for you to offer the guests and to offer them a few minutes to talk about some of their community connections, and maybe a question for you to talk about some of the organizations that you support that some of the folks in the room may not be aware of, or to give 5 minutes for them to bring in a guest to speak for the organization. Maybe something to do. I think your guests would really enjoy that.
Yeah.
And then the other for you, Carol, is you talked about how Brevard helped. And you've talked a lot about how you enjoy living in Brevard, and I think that's probably an undercurrent through this. I'm sure there were days when it was nice to be able to drive over the causeway to the beach. Yeah. Probably helped a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in other ways, can you give some more specifics that Brevard helped as you were growing the business? Can you provide a little more detail there?
Sure. Well, you know, I talked about the banker. So I talked about, that was BB&T, and Rick Roach was the guy at the time. I don't know if you know who Rick is. But then also like my accountants, and I'm naming names, and these aren't the only ones, obviously, but Berman Hopkins, they just had that attitude early on, realizing I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was my own accountant up to that point, and I think we had like $1 million in sales, like what was I doing doing the one doing the taxes? But those relationships, and it was just that feeling like family with these organizations that should be your support organizations. I mean, you shouldn't be afraid of your bank. You shouldn't have an adversarial type of a relationship. It should be a trusted partnership. And that's what I saw a lot of here in Brevard. And the same thing with some of the other companies that are out here. I never look at anyone like a competitor. There's enough to go around. There's enough pieces of the pie. We all ought to be working together. And I think that Brevard fosters that relationship, family type of environment. So that was really what it was. Also think there's a lot of great programs here, and I took advantage of everything. This has been in the last few years. Like Brevard Workforce, now Career Source, EDC, getting involved in those kinds of organizations, and they do it well. The EDC really is a great organization. They've done a lot of good things. I don't always agree with everything they do, but that's really helped me by getting involved in the community that way and taking advantage of that. So, I encourage it. And, so I don't know if this sounds bad, but, I do kind of get tired of your rubber chicken dinners, and I get tired of having to go and shake hands, and, because I'm not an introvert, but I do get kind of embarrassed, and I don't like to speak in public that often, and I like a little more one-on-one. I love this. I mean, this is great. But I knew...
And we have pizza. No chicken.
You have pizza. Yeah, I like that. But I knew I had to do that. I knew I had to get out there and get to know people and do those events. And now I have fun because they're friends. A lot of the same people go to those same events. So it's turned out really, really nice. But that's a lot of what it was. And the community thing, I think that's a great idea to have organizations, because there's social entrepreneur as well. But here in Brevard, there's a lot of nonprofits. Brevard cares about its nonprofits. It's so important. And it was by accident. The executive director of Junior Achievement had done some research on me. She was very good. She was looking to see, this company, what do they do? And then she found out I was in Junior Achievement growing up. Well, there's my entrepreneurial thing. I forgot about that. I guess I did that in high school, where you make a product and go through the whole Junior Achievement. Anyway, she asked me to be on the board. And I get on this board. I did not belong on this board. It was like this, A-listers in Brevard County and, C-suite type of people. I show up in my jeans and, boots and a sweatshirt, and here everybody is in their suits and stuff. But I also can't just sit by. I'm not on a board just for my resume, and I just kind of jumped right in, got involved, got to know people. And then from there you go to another board, which can be a problem here in Brevard County, because they will ask you to be on every board possible, and you've got to learn to say no, and I don't do it very well. But again, I think it's important. I think whether you're young, you're older, there's so much in this community that's good that I don't see in other communities, and that's how you become a part of it. I mean, that's how you grow your businesses, where you are successful, with your jobs and so forth. So, good idea. Am I putting you guys to sleep because I talk too much? It's another thing my mother told me, I talk too much.
Hi. You seem to be a very self-reliant person, but I wonder, during your career, have you had mentors you've worked with, or people that you look at from afar and think, well, they're kind of a model for me. I like to kind of do what they do. I like how they say things. I like how, their actions.
Yeah.
Who your models or mentors?
I have so many I can't even count. I'm insecure as it is. So for me, I was like, I don't know anything. Everybody knows everything else. So I listened to every business person I met, asked them questions. Scott Sorensen was here. His business is very different. We don't agree on everything, but there were some things that, I'm like, oh, that's really smart. And so I learned from him. My mother, government contractors, every contracting firm that I went and talked to, I'd ask them questions, and I'd remember, and I'd go back home and, take notes. I didn't have, I don't think, a lot of the programs that are in place now, especially here in Brevard, something like this, or some of the forums and things that are out there. So it was kind of do it on your own. So I just asked a lot of questions. So yeah, and that's a really, boring answer, that I have lots of mentors and I just can't name them. But I also read, I mean, like, Richard Branson is one of his story is one of the coolest stories. I read Nuts, which is the Southwest, Herb Keller. You read that book. I mean, he's different. He's kind of like me, like, all right, whatever, I am what I am, and I don't care if you don't like me, kind of a thing. But his personality leads to loyalty. He took care of his employees. They have fun at work, that kind of thing. So those are, maybe the mentors from afar that I really respected what they did. So we have to have mentors. I mean, we're all learning. Nobody knows the answers. Some of the CEOs think they know all the answers, but they don't.
Well, while the mic's going around, I wanted to ask a quick question. Now, in your bio, it said the unconventional CEO, then it said trademark.
Yeah.
Is there a book in the works?
There is a book in the works. I don't know if I can say that. Are there any young kids in here? How young? Okay, I won't say it. The title of the book is Make the Stuff Up As You Go. You can insert the word, but yes, and there is. And I didn't want to do this. One of my guys was saying, man, you can't make this stuff up. You got to write this down. And he also said, if you could capture some of this stuff that you learned the hard way, it might help some people, when they're trying to do it. So we're doing it. And the MTSUAYG, it's the actual acronym for it, came about because one of my guys was telling me, it's the president of my manufacturing center, he was telling me that one day he's in a meeting and one of the guys is asking, well, what's your business philosophy? And he wrote it up on the board, MTUA, whatever. And I looked at Mark and I'm like, oh, that's mine. That's what I've done. But see, I was smart enough to trademark it. So that's what I did right afterwards. I'm like, that's a great idea, Mark. And then I called my patent lawyer and said, hey, can we trademark this whole thing? So we trademarked the unconventional CEO and the I can't do the acronym, MTSUAYG. So yes, so there is a book. The book honestly is intended to tell the story of, if I can do this, anybody can do this. Because basically I'm an idiot, and I'm probably lucky to be alive at this point, just because sometimes we don't make good decisions. And I'm alive because my mother says a lot of prayers. But the point is, that really anybody can do it. There's just kind of some fundamental things, to remember and to focus on. And, if I ever finish the book, I don't know. It's been in the works for a while, and it's one of those multitask things that I'm supposed to be reading pages and doing and updating, and I'm not doing it, so, yeah.
I looked this up because I did the same research probably you did, but there's a book out there that was endorsed by Warren Buffett that's called The Outsiders, and there's unconventional CEOs. And so my first assumption was that you were following in that footstep, and I read a little bit on it, and I thought, wow, it really seems like a real esoteric kind of diverse angle that book was taken versus some of what I saw in your bio. So it's misleading right now, but it'll be very exciting to see what comes of that. See what happens from that. If I could ask you about the business a little bit, about how do you in your business approach innovation? And how do you think about bringing new products? I don't know much about the business that you're in, but I imagine there's a lot of controls that are expected to be around the processes. There's a lot of design, building to specification. How do you approach innovation in a world like that, as opposed to, say, software engineering, where it's here's a problem and I have really no rules about how I solve it, other than I'm going to do it with information technology?
Yeah, see, the innovation that we deal with mostly right now has been more process. It's been more business related. It's been how to do things, faster, better, cheaper, that whole thing. Just now we're moving with the manufacturing, into seeing opportunities and innovation, and again, we mainly have people coming to us saying, I've got a really good idea, but they can't take it to the next level. Whether it's they don't have money, whether it's they don't have the vision, and that's not bad. A lot of times, you've got a great idea, you're a great engineer, it's good, but you don't have the business side, and that's okay, because that's the support that you need. So again, I'm probably not a good person to answer how we deal with that, because it's a different environment, I think, than what you're talking about. But we support innovation on the other side. And that's for me is the takeaway, for people to take away, is that innovation doesn't mean creating a product. That's the newest and greatest and disruptive and whatever. It's really about doing things differently than what everybody else did and doing it better and more successful. And that's kind of the innovation in our company. Hopefully I don't know if that answered or not.
If you could pass the mic back, please.
You're doing a great job. I'm curious, without revealing too much, if you could talk a little bit about the mistakes you've made.
Okay.
Are you hard on yourself? And how do you get beyond the mistakes?
People always ask me, would I do anything differently? Would I go back and change anything? And I say, absolutely not. I'm so happy with where I am, and it's been painful, and it's still painful, but I wouldn't change it. So mistakes, there are no mistakes, and you've heard this whole thing, right? You learn from your failures. There's no such thing, and maybe that's how I deal with them. That I cannot get bogged down on the fact that I just screwed up, or I just lost this money, or I made a poor decision. Because I don't have time for that, I've got to move on. I'll give you an example of, well, there's a couple mistakes, and some of the mistakes have focused around trusting people. And early on, this is way before I moved here and the company got bigger, I invested with a guy who was going to have a gym. He was opening a gym or something like that, and in the consulting, I happened to be doing really well, so I had a lot of cash, and I thought I was smart, and oh wow, okay, I'll trust this guy, and he was nice, and I trusted him, and I lost like $30,000 like that, and that was a lot of money for me. I mean, I didn't, and so that was a mistake, but it also kind of taught me just slow down a little bit, don't diversify into something that I don't understand. I had no business doing that. Technology, engineering, even the manufacturing, a background in that as well, that's okay, but, opening a gym, not so much. So that's one of the mistakes. I've also hired people that didn't necessarily work out, and I've held on to them a little bit too long. And I still kind of do that. And I guess then again I look at it and go, you know what, that's okay, I can sleep at night then. If I'm holding on, because you never know, I might hold on to that person and they turn out to be the right person. Because then you realize, okay, maybe it's me, maybe we can work better together. And an example of where it did work is that I hired the guy who's now my chief operating officer. I hired him, he was right out of the military. Within like a year or so, we were just about at blows, and I think it was, he came out of the military, and he was career military. I don't think he was used to working with women and personalities, and it was different. And there was one point where my husband's in between us, and kind of yelling at each other across. We're at like a bar or something, and at one point I just go, "Fine, do whatever you want," And it was at that point I could have said, "Okay, we're done, forget it," but instead I actually sat down and talked to him and said, I don't know if you know this, but you're upsetting a lot of the women's company, you're upsetting this and that, whatever. And he's like, I am? I said, yeah, you didn't know? He's like, no, I didn't know. I started talking about it, and like I said, he's now my COO, and he's amazing. He can pretty much read my mind. I guarantee he can read my mind better than he can read his wife's mind at this point. And so if I had kind of cut loose early on, I wouldn't have this great number 2 guy who's been with me the whole time and pretty much can't live without. So it's those kinds of things. I guess those are some of the mistakes, but it's hard to regret them, when they end up teaching you something else later on, which I guess is the moral.
All right. Okay, while the mic's making its way to the next questioner.
I have a question about the manufacturing side. Right now you say you're doing prototyping. Do you have any plans of doing production runs, military contracts, etc.?
Yeah, we're doing prototypes. We're also doing production, and we're also doing some light manufacturing. What we really are is more of a contract manufacturing facility. The former NSLD, so it's an MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul, but it's also got some, verticals where you can do different things. So our customers have all different types of requirements. Not always one-offs, but it's a little more high precision, more detailed, human-rated, flight types of items, things like that. So I don't want to do high volume production. I don't want to be in the business of, 10,000 of these things that make, 10 cents, each. Being an engineer, I want to create something that's different. And this was one thing too, that when I started this manufacturer, I said, I don't want to do build to print. I want an engineering team, and I want us to be able to decide the best way to develop this engineering team and do it, because when we're supporting other customers, we're following their engineering processes. We're doing what they want. And I don't always agree with that. It's so, it's not as front-end loaded as it should be. The whole, collaborative, participatory design, that kind of thing. So that was what we have ended up doing. So we've got a design team that can, no kidding, take the requirements, make them better, support the customer, and then take it all the way through the product life cycle, and then repeat if it's, kind of light volume manufacturing. So that's really what the focus is. So it's different than your true, manufacturing the same thing over and over. And it's really hard because people say, what do you make? I'm like, I don't know, we make all kinds of things, lots of stuff. It's different than saying I make, headrest pins for Toyota, and I do 10,000 of those every month kind of a thing.
All right, so we've been
If
at
I
it
put
for
you all to
about-
sleep at this point, I'm sorry. It's
No.
like it's 8 o'clock.
Okay.
Don't we go?
We'll make that our last question because it's been an hour. After that, we'll break, and you can actually come up and talk to Carol. She's right here. Normally during one of these, I reach over and touch, but they put a bigger table this time, so I can't. That's it. She's right there, so afterwards, please feel free to come up and talk to Carol, ask more questions. I actually want to know what some of those tips are in your book before it comes out. I can't wait.
Okay, very cool.
We'll let that.
Carol, I wonder if are you in the area of prototype and manufacturing, are you doing anything with 3D printing?
We tried. So we have 3 3D printers, but we're not using them. And that was probably one of the bigger letdowns. I know that the opportunity is out there, but it didn't really fit in our core. We've used it, actually we use it more to support the community. We'll do projects for robotics, or we'll do projects for like the art festival thing that was up in Titusville, that kind of thing. But we really aren't. And for us, it really had to be more of a support type of a role, as opposed to, there's a gentleman that I know here locally has his own 3D rapid prototyping company, and he does that. That's what he does. And so to compete against him or try to make that another business line doesn't make sense. So again, we'll just do it a little bit internally, but those machines aren't really running too much.
All right. Well, thank you, folks, for coming out. Thank you,
for
Carol, so much. It's been wonderful. Well, this is the end of our little discussion here. Please hang out. You can feel free to move the chairs out of the way and just mingle. There's other interesting folks here, and of course, there's Carol.
Oh, there's Carol. Yeah.
Thank you again.
Oh, thank you.